My wife looked me dead in the eyes and said, I want the house, the cars, the business, everything. She wasn't crying. She wasn't apologizing. She was demanding like she was ordering something off a menu at Whataburger, like 18 years of marriage, 2 kids, and everything I'd built with my own hands was just a transaction she was ready to close. My lawyer grabbed my arm so hard I thought he'd leave a bruise. Hugh Pemberton had been practicing commercial law in Dallas for 25 years. He'd seen nasty divorces. He'd seen spouses try to destroy each other over oil money and real estate empires. But when I told him what I was about to do, the color drained from his face like water from a busted pipe. Cruz, don't do this. We can fight. We should fight. She's not entitled to half of what she's asking for. I looked at him. Then I looked at Sophia, sitting across the conference table with her attorney, that smug little smile on her face. The same face I used to kiss goodnight after Friday night football games at Richardson High. The same woman I held when her father died from complications after his diabetes got worse. The same person who swore before God and our families at Sacred Heart Cathedral that she'd stand by me through everything. Give it all to her, I said. Hugh dropped his pen like it was on fire. Excuse me? You heard me. The house, the cars, the business. Give her everything she wants. Sophia's smile flickered for just a second. She wasn't expecting that response. Her lawyer leaned over and whispered something in her ear. She nodded slowly, like a cat who just cornered a mouse. She thought she'd broken me. She thought I was surrendering like some defeated man who'd finally given up the fight. Everyone in that room thought the same thing. My mother called me that night in tears. Rosa Rodriguez raised 3 boys on her own after my father died in an industrial accident at a chemical plant in Deer Park. She worked double shifts as a medical technician at Parkland Hospital, the same place where President Kennedy was brought after he was shot. She sacrificed everything so Diego, Pablo, and I could have a future. And now she was watching her youngest son hand over his entire life to a woman who didn't deserve a single cent of it. Cruz, please, mijo. Your father built that company from nothing. He poured his heart into Rodriguez Electric. You can't just give it away. You can't. Mom, I need you to trust me. Trust you? Cruz, you're not thinking straight. You're hurt. You're angry. Let me call Diego. Let us help you. I'm not angry, Mom. Not anymore. And I promise you, I know exactly what I'm doing. She didn't believe me. I could hear it in her voice, that tremor of fear that her son had finally snapped under the weight of betrayal. My brother Diego showed up at my apartment the next day. He's a petroleum welder, big guy, protective as a guard dog. Works the Gulf Coast rigs 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, making the kind of money that lets him drive a brand new Silverado and take his family on vacations to Colorado every summer. He's never liked Sophia, and he made that crystal clear from the day I introduced them at a family barbecue. But he kept his mouth shut for 18 years because he loved me and he respected my choices. He didn't keep his mouth shut that day. You're telling me you're going to let her walk away with everything? The house we helped you renovate with our own hands? The business Dad started in his garage with nothing but a used van and a toolbox? You're just going to hand it over like some kind of Christmas present? Yes, I am. Why? I pulled out a folder from the kitchen table, thick as a Dallas phone book, full of documents, bank statements, invoices, canceled checks. I slid it across the table like I was dealing cards in a high-stakes poker game, because she doesn't know what she's really taking. Diego opened the folder with the same careful attention he uses when he's checking welds on a pressure vessel. He read the first page, then the second. His face started changing as he worked through the documents. By the 5th page, his jaw was tight and his hands were shaking like he'd been working in a North Sea gale. Is this real? Every single word, every signature, every transaction. And she doesn't know you found this? Not a clue. He closed the folder and looked at me with something I hadn't seen in his eyes since we were kids. Respect. Real respect. Little brother, you might be the smartest man I've ever met. See, everyone thought I was broken. They thought I'd given up the fight before it even started. They saw a man who walked into divorce proceedings and waved the white flag without throwing a single punch. But they didn't know what I knew. They didn't see what I'd found buried in 18 months of financial records. They didn't understand that sometimes the best way to win isn't to fight harder. It's to step aside and let your enemy walk straight into the trap they built for themselves. So, when I walked into that courthouse for the final hearing, I wasn't nervous, I wasn't scared, I wasn't defeated, I was patient. Patient like my father taught me to be when we were running conduit through concrete walls or troubleshooting a three-phase electrical panel that someone else had wired wrong. Sophia sat at her table, dressed like she was ready for a magazine cover shoot. She'd already picked out new furniture for the house. She'd already made plans to rebrand the business with some fancy new logo. She'd already spent money in her mind that she thought was coming to her. She smiled at me when I walked in, that cold, victorious smile that said she'd finally won. I signed every document they put in front of me. I agreed to every single term. My lawyer looked like he was attending a funeral for his best friend. And then the courtroom doors opened. Two men walked in, dark suits, serious faces, federal badges visible on their belts. One of them carried a manila envelope that would change everything. They handed a document to Sophia's lawyer. I watched his face turn white like fresh primer on a new wall. I watched him lean over and whisper 5 words into her ear. 5 words that changed everything. Sophia's smile disappeared like someone had flipped a breaker switch. Her hands started shaking. And then she screamed. She screamed so loud the bailiff rushed over from his position by the judge's bench. She screamed my name like it was a curse word. But I just sat there, calm as a summer morning in East Texas, and watched the woman who stole my trust, my money, and my family finally get exactly what she deserved. My name is Cruz Rodriguez, and this is the story of how I lost everything and won. Let me take you back to where it all started, because you need to understand the foundation before you can appreciate how perfectly it all came crashing down. I grew up in Garland, Texas, just east of Dallas, where the suburbs meet the working-class neighborhoods that built this city. My father, Mario Rodriguez, was an electrician, not the kind who shows up 3 hours late and charges you double for changing out a ceiling fan. He was the real deal. Commercial electrical work, office buildings, manufacturing plants, shopping centers that were sprouting up all over the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex, like wildflowers after a good rain. He started Rodriguez Electric in 1995, working out of our 2-car garage with nothing but a beat-up Ford van, a tool bag that had seen better days, and a willingness to outwork everyone else in Texas. By the time I was 14 and could legally work construction sites, I was riding along on jobs during summer break. By 18, I could wire a 480-volt 3-phase panel and pull 12-gauge wire through rigid conduit better than most journeyman electricians who'd been doing the work for years. My brothers went different directions after high school. Diego fell in love with welding and found his way to the petroleum industry where the real money was. Pablo joined the Army and ended up stationed in Colorado, married a local girl, and never came back to Texas. But me, I loved the electrical work. I loved the precision of it, the way everything had to be exactly right, or people could get hurt. I loved building something permanent with my hands. I loved solving electrical problems that other contractors would look at for 5 minutes and then walk away shaking their heads. Dad died in an industrial accident when I was 32. Electrical fire at a chemical processing plant down in Deer Park. The safety protocols that were supposed to protect him failed. They found him unconscious from smoke inhalation, trying to shut down the main breaker to save other workers. The doctors at Herman Hospital said it was quick, said he probably didn't feel a thing. I don't know if that made it better or worse. He left me the business. Rodriguez Electric, 10 good employees, solid contracts with some of the biggest developments in Frisco and Allen, and a legacy that I swore on his grave I would protect with everything I had. I met Sophia 3 years before Dad passed. She was working as a real estate agent with Keller Williams, one of those sharp, ambitious women who could sell ice to an Eskimo. She was showing commercial properties in Richardson where we were upgrading electrical systems for a new medical complex. The developer was converting an old office building into a state-of-the-art clinic, and they needed someone who could handle the complex electrical requirements for medical equipment. Sophia had this laugh that could fill a room and make everyone else want to laugh along with her. She made me feel like the most interesting man alive, even when I was covered in electrical tape residue and smelled like wire nuts and PVC cement. She'd bring me coffee during long days, ask intelligent questions about the work, and listen like she actually cared about the answers. We dated for 2 years, real dating, not just hooking up on weekends. She'd come to family barbecues and charmed my mother with her Spanish and her willingness to help in the kitchen. She'd sit through Cowboys games with Diego, and actually pay attention to what was happening on the field. She made an effort to understand my world, and I fell hard for that. We got married at Sacred Heart Cathedral in downtown Dallas, the same church where my parents had gotten married 25 years earlier. My mother cried during the ceremony. Diego gave a toast at the reception that had everyone laughing and crying at the same time. Sophia looked at me during our first dance like I was her whole world, like she couldn't believe she'd gotten lucky enough to find me. For a while, I believed I was her whole world. Carmen came along 3 years later, a beautiful baby girl with her mother's dark eyes and my stubborn streak. She'd grab onto my finger with her tiny hand and refuse to let go, even when she was sleeping. Then Luis arrived 2 years after that, a wild little boy who wanted to be just like his dad from the moment he could walk. I used to carry him on my shoulders through Home Depot on Saturday mornings, letting him pick out electrical supplies he was too young to understand, explaining how circuit breakers worked and why we used different gauges of wire for different applications. Those were good years, hard years, but good ones. I worked 60, sometimes 70 hours a week building the business. We landed bigger contracts, hired more electricians, bought newer trucks with the Rodriguez Electric logo painted on the sides, the DFW Airport Expansion Project, the Star Development in Frisco, where the Cowboys practice, medical centers in Plano, that required specialized electrical systems for operating rooms and diagnostic. Equipment. I wasn't getting rich like the oil guys or the tech entrepreneurs, but I was providing well for my family. I was building something my kids could be proud of, something that could support them and their families for generations. At least, that's what I thought I was building. But somewhere around year 12 of our marriage, Sophia changed. It didn't happen all at once, like a blown fuse that kills the power instantly. It was slow, gradual, like insulation degrading over time in Texas heat. You don't notice it until sparks start flying and the whole system shorts out. She stopped asking about my day when I came home covered in dust from crawling through attics installing new circuits. She started complaining about the house, even though we'd spent 3 summers renovating it with Diego's help, upgrading everything from the kitchen cabinets to the master bathroom. She wanted a bigger kitchen, a nicer car, vacations to places like Hawaii and Europe that we couldn't afford without putting the business at risk. Everyone else is moving forward, Cruz. Why are we standing still? We're not standing still. We're building something solid, something that will last. Building what? This? She gestured around our living room like it was some kind of prison instead of the home we'd worked so hard to create. I didn't sign up for this life. You signed up for me, Sophia. You knew exactly who I was when you married me. She didn't answer that. She just walked away, leaving me standing there, wondering when I'd become the enemy instead of her husband. I told myself it was stress. I told myself she was tired from raising 2 kids while I worked the long hours that building a business demands. I told myself that if I just worked harder, made more money, gave her the things she wanted, everything would get better between us. I was wrong, dead wrong. She quit her real estate job with Keller Williams, claiming she needed to focus on the kids full time. But Carmen and Luis were both in school all day, and when I came home exhausted from running wire through concrete walls or troubleshooting electrical problems that had stumped other contractors, she was usually on her phone or watching reality TV shows. The house was a mess. Dinner was takeout from whatever restaurant was closest. Every conversation we tried to have turned into a fight about money. That's when I made the biggest mistake of my life. I hired Javier Morales. I needed help managing the growing business. Rodriguez Electric had landed contracts for major projects like the Toyota Music Factory renovation and new developments in Legacy West. I was drowning in procurement schedules, vendor relationships, and client communications. I couldn't be out in the field running jobs and sitting in offices negotiating contracts at the same time. A buddy who worked for one of the big electrical contractors in Dallas recommended Javier, said he was sharp as a new drill bit, professional, trustworthy. Former project manager at a major outfit, wanted to work for a smaller company where he could have more impact. He had references, experience with commercial electrical projects, and a confident smile that made clients feel like their projects were in good hands. Javier showed up to our first meeting in a pressed shirt and tie, carrying a leather portfolio full of ideas about efficiency and optimization and growth strategies. He talked about streamlining our procurement process, building better relationships with suppliers, expanding into industrial electrical work that paid premium rates. He made me feel like I'd been running my father's company with one hand tied behind my back, but he could help me unlock its full potential. I handed him the keys to the kingdom, every vendor account, every supplier relationship, every purchasing decision that Rodriguez Electric made. I gave him access to our business banking accounts, our credit lines with electrical supply houses, our contracts with major clients. Looking back, I can see exactly how stupid that was. But at the time, I was exhausted from trying to do everything myself. I was trying to save my marriage while growing a business. I was trying to be a good father while working 70-hour weeks. I didn't have the energy or the paranoia to question a man who came with glowing recommendations. Javier started coming to the house for family barbecues on Sundays. Sophia loved him immediately. She laughed at his jokes like they were the funniest things she'd ever heard. She asked about his life, his background, his plans for the future. She treated him like an honored guest, while she treated me like the hired help who tracked mud through her clean house. I should have seen it. The signs were as obvious as exposed wiring, but I trusted her. I trusted him. I trusted that the life I'd built meant something to the people I'd built it with. My mother tried to warn me. Rosa Rodriguez is not a woman who speaks without thinking, especially about family matters. So when she pulled me aside after Sunday dinner one evening, I should have listened more carefully. Cruz, something's not right with that woman. Mom, please not this again. I'm not trying to start trouble, mijo. I'm trying to protect my son. She looks at you like you're a stranger who wandered into her house. And the way she looks at that project manager of yours, that's something else entirely. I told her she was imagining things. I told her that Sophia and I were going through a rough patch, but we'd work it out like married couples do. I told her that successful marriages require effort and patience, and I wasn't giving up without a fight. I was wrong about everything, so incredibly devastatingly wrong, and I was about to find out just how deep the betrayal went. It was a Tuesday in August, one of those scorching hot days when the asphalt gets soft and the air conditioning units all over Dallas work overtime. I remember the date because we had a major electrical installation scheduled at a new medical complex in Allen. It was supposed to be a full-day job, installing specialized circuits for diagnostic equipment that required perfectly stable power. But the general contractor called that morning and pushed the start date back a week. Something about city electrical inspections not clearing in time. I decided to go home early, maybe surprise Sophia with lunch from her favorite Mexican restaurant, maybe catch up on some paperwork in my home office, maybe spend some time with the kids when they got home from school. I stopped at a gas station on the way home and bought her favorite flowers, yellow roses from the cooler by the checkout counter. She used to love when I brought her flowers for no special reason, back when small gestures still meant something to her. I pulled into our driveway around noon. Sophia's white Honda Pilot was parked in its usual spot, which meant she was home. But when I walked through the front door with those yellow roses in my hand, the house was quiet. Too quiet, like when you flip a breaker and suddenly realize how much background noise the electrical systems make. Sophia, you here? No answer. I set the flowers on the kitchen counter next to a stack of unopened mail and walked through the living room. Nothing seemed out of place. I figured maybe she was taking a nap. She'd been complaining about headaches lately, claiming the stress of managing our household was wearing her down. I headed upstairs toward our bedroom. The door was closed, which was unusual for the middle of the day. I could hear something on the other side. Voices, low, muffled conversation that didn't sound like television. My heart started pounding before my brain fully processed what was happening. Some primitive part of me already knew what I was about to find. Some instinct that had been trying to warn me for months finally broke through all the denial and wishful thinking. I pushed open that bedroom door, and there they were. Sophia and Javier Morales, in my bed, in my house, in the room where my children had come to say goodnight thousands of times. Time stopped. The world went silent except for the sound of my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I just stood there holding a bouquet of yellow roses, staring at the two people I trusted most in the world, wrapped around each other like I didn't exist, like I'd never existed. Sophia screamed when she saw me. Javier scrambled for his clothes like his life depended on it. And something inside me went cold. Not hot with anger, not burning with rage. Just cold, like someone had replaced my blood with liquid nitrogen. Cruz, wait, let me explain this. Explain what, Sophia? Explain how you ended up in bed with my project manager? Explain how long this has been going on behind my back? She pulled the sheet around herself like modesty still mattered, like dignity was something she could wrap around her shoulders. It's not what you think it is. It's exactly what I think it is. How long has this been happening? She didn't answer. She looked at Javier instead, seeking guidance from her partner in betrayal. He was buttoning his shirt, avoiding my eyes like a guilty child. How long? I asked again, my voice steady as a concrete foundation. Javier finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. About 18 months. 18 months. A year and a half of lies. 78 weeks of smiling at me across the dinner table while they planned their secret meetings. 18 months of handshakes and business discussions and pretending to be my trusted partner while he was sleeping with my wife in my own bed. Get out of my house. Cruz, let's talk about this like reasonable adults, Javier said, moving toward the door. Business is business. This doesn't have to affect our working relationship. I stepped in front of him, blocking his path to the hallway. Business? You call this business? You've eaten Thanksgiving dinner with my family. You've held my children. You looked me in the eye every single week for 18 months and lied to my face. I think you're overreacting to this situation. That's when something snapped inside me. I grabbed him by the collar of his half-buttoned shirt and shoved him against the wall hard enough to rattle the family pictures hanging there. I'm not a violent man. I've never thrown a punch in anger in my entire adult life. But in that moment, I wanted to break him into pieces small enough to fit through a garbage disposal. Get out, right now, before I do something I can't take back. He left. Didn't even look at Sophia on his way out. Didn't offer her any comfort or support. Just ran like the coward he was. Sophia started crying then. Real tears or performance art, I couldn't tell anymore. Cruz, please. I was lonely. You're never home. You don't pay attention to me anymore. I needed someone who made me feel wanted, someone who made me feel alive. I've worked 70 hours a week for 18 years to give you everything you ever asked for. The house, the cars, the vacations, the life you said you wanted, and this is how you repay that sacrifice. Maybe if you were here more, maybe if you tried harder to connect with me, tried harder. Sophia, I've given you 18 years of my life. I've given you everything I have, everything I am. Well, it wasn't enough. Those 4 words hit me like a live electrical wire. It wasn't enough. Nothing I'd done, nothing I'd built, nothing I'd sacrificed had been enough for her. I left the house that night and drove to my mother's place in the old neighborhood. I sat on her back porch until the sun came up, drinking coffee and trying to figure out how I'd missed something so obvious for so long, how I'd been so blind to what was happening in my own home. A week later, Sophia filed for divorce. But she didn't just want to end our marriage. She wanted to destroy me completely. The house, both vehicles, full custody of Carmen and Luis, and Rodriguez Electric, the company my father built with his own hands, the business I dedicated my entire adult life to growing. Her lawyer sent over a demand letter that made my stomach turn like bad barbacoa. She claimed she'd been an unpaid partner in building the business. She said she deserved compensation for years of emotional labor and domestic sacrifice. She wanted alimony, child support, and ownership of everything we'd built together. My lawyer, Hugh Pemberton, called me the same day he received those papers. Cruz, this is legal extortion. She's not entitled to your family's business. We can fight this. I know we can win. Good, so let's start building our case. Not yet, Hugh. There's something I need to investigate first. That night, I drove to the Rodriguez Electric office and let myself in with my key. I pulled every financial record from the last 18 months. Bank statements, invoices, vendor payments, check registers, credit card statements. I spread them all across my father's old wooden desk and started reading line by line. By midnight, I'd found the first fake invoice. A bill for electrical panels from Schneider Electric that had never been delivered to any job site. By 2 in the morning, I'd found 12 more. By sunrise, I'd uncovered nearly $180,000 in fraudulent transactions spread across 18 months. Shell companies with names that sounded legitimate but led nowhere. Fake vendors billing us for copper wire and conduit that never existed. Payments for electrical supplies that had somehow vanished between the purchase order and the job site. And on half of those checks, right there in black ink, was my wife's signature. Sophia wasn't just cheating on me with my project manager. She was robbing me blind. They'd been running a coordinated theft operation for a year and a half, skimming money from the business my father died building, and she thought she was going to get away with it. I sat in my mother's kitchen the next morning with that folder spread out in front of me like evidence in a murder trial. 18 months of systematic theft, nearly $180,000 stolen from the company, fake invoices and shell companies, and my wife's signature on check after check after check. My first instinct was to confront her immediately, to throw these documents in her face and watch her scramble for excuses, to call the police and have her arrested on the spot. But then I stopped myself and thought it through like an electrician troubleshooting a complex wiring problem. Sophia was smart, not wise, but calculating and clever. She'd spent months planning this scheme with Javier. If I tipped her off now, she'd find a way to cover her tracks. She'd blame everything on him, she'd destroy evidence, she'd twist the story until she looked like the innocent victim of manipulation. I needed a different approach, a better plan. I called my brother Diego that afternoon. He drove over after finishing a welding shift, still smelling like crude oil and metal, and I handed him a cold Shiner Bock before sliding the folder across the kitchen table. What's this? Proof that my wife and my project manager have been stealing from me for 18 months. Diego opened the folder. He's not a man who shows emotion easily. 15 years of working dangerous oil rigs teaches you to keep a steady face under pressure. But as he flipped through those pages, documenting transaction after transaction, I watched his jaw tighten and his knuckles go white with anger. $180,000. And Sophia signed off on all of this? About half of it. Javier handled the rest. Diego closed the folder and looked at me with something approaching admiration. What are you going to do? I'm going to let her take the company. He stared at me like I'd lost my mind completely. You're going to what? Think about it, Diego. She wants Rodriguez Electric in the divorce. She's demanding ownership of everything. If I fight her in court, she'll dig in and hide the evidence. She'll make this drag out for years while she covers her tracks. But if I give it to her willingly, she takes ownership of everything, including 18 months of financial fraud. You're going to let her inherit her own crimes. Exactly. Diego leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. That's either the smartest thing I've ever heard or the dumbest. I need your help finding a forensic accountant, someone who can document all of this properly and build a case that will hold up in federal court. Federal court. This isn't just theft, Diego. This is wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering. These fake invoices went through business accounts that crossed state lines. Money got transferred to shell companies in Nevada and Delaware. This is federal territory. 3 days later, I was sitting in a conference room with a forensic accountant named Dale Richter. He was a quiet man in his 50s with reading glasses and 20 years of experience investigating financial crimes. Diego knew him through industrial safety investigations. I handed him everything, every bank statement, every invoice, every canceled check, every digital transaction record. He spent 3 weeks going through it all with the methodical precision of a master electrician, documenting every fraudulent transaction, tracing every fake vendor, building an ironclad timeline of the theft. When he finished his investigation, he called me back to his office. Mr. Rodriguez, you have an extremely strong case here. This isn't amateur hour theft. This is systematic embezzlement executed over 18 months. Your wife and your project manager have been running a sophisticated financial fraud operation. What are my options? You could pursue civil charges and sue them both for damages. But given the scope and interstate nature of this fraud, I'd strongly recommend going to the federal authorities. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division handles cases exactly like this one. Wire fraud alone carries up to 20 years in federal prison. How do we proceed? I submit my findings to the IRS. They open a criminal investigation. It happens quietly, behind the scenes. No one knows anything until they're ready to make arrests. And if my wife takes legal ownership of the company before that happens, Dale smiled like a man who'd seen this scenario play out before. Then she assumes full legal liability for everything that company has done. Every fraudulent transaction, every fake invoice, every stolen dollar. It all becomes her legal responsibility. I shook his hand and walked out of that office feeling something I hadn't felt in months. hope mixed with cold satisfaction. The next few weeks were the hardest acting job of my life. I had to sit across from Sophia in mediation sessions and pretend to be a defeated man. I had to watch her smirk and gloat while her lawyer listed demand after demand. My own lawyer thought I was having a complete nervous breakdown. When the final hearing arrived, I signed every document they put in front of me. Sophia smiled that cold, victorious smile, thinking she'd finally won. Then the federal agents walked in. "Your business partner was arrested," her lawyer whispered. Sophia's world collapsed in that moment. 22 months in federal prison for Javier. 3 years probation for Sophia, plus full restitution that forced her to liquidate everything she'd stolen from me. I started over with Rodriguez Electric Solutions. Smaller, cleaner, but mine. My old crew came back. New contracts followed. Within 6 months, we had more work than we could handle. My wife wanted everything in that divorce. I gave it to her. Every lie, every stolen dollar, every consequence she'd earned. She thought she was taking my future, but all she took was her own. Character, integrity, the love of your children, those things can't be stolen. They have to be earned. And once you earn them, no one can take them away. My name is Cruz Rodriguez, and that's my story.